Several violations of a probation sentence may land tax activist Douglas Bruce in jail amidst a potential campaign to alter the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, a law he helped to write. Bruce claims he is innocent, that he's a political prisoner, but a Denver district court judge has ruled that he violated 5 different conditions of his probation. Penn, Douglas Bruce is not the only face of Tabor. It's been on the books for a long time, but he's a significant face of the issue, and with a pretty big campaign, theoretically, at least potentially coming in 2016, is this situation a big deal?
It's a big deal only because Douglas Bruce is a criminal, not a political prisoner. You know, if you talk to many people involved in the early days of Tabor and folks who actually sponsored and promoted efforts prior to Tabor, remember it was on the ballot several times and failed before it was approved, many of them will tell you that Douglas Bruce was sort of a bit player and wasn't the lead person here, but when the cameras were rolling, he jumped front and center and, you know, took the spotlight. And at this point, I think he's become so antagonistic and he has become an issue in and of himself. Any campaign against any sort of modification of Tabor, a lot of the opponents probably wouldn't want him too close to it anyway. He's just a negative lightning rod at this place, and at this point, and he may run around and kick a few more reporters or cameramen too. So,
Natasha, if you're running the campaign again, if there's going to be one that's going to do something to de-Bruce a big chunk of Tabor this fall, do you bring this up? Do you let it be?
Well, if I'm running it in favor, yes, you say de-Bruce as much as you can. And if you're against it, you do everything you can to distance yourself from his personal history. And that's where it's a bit unfair. It's a distraction from the bigger question of Tabor and what it means. You know, Tabor is not something that's a lot of fun to talk about. It's not particularly easy to understand, but it's become something I find myself talking about with people on an almost weekly basis. It's the type of thing that you're in a casual conversation and people say, well, you're a reporter, explain it to me. And then suddenly you have to interpret what is a fairly complicated thing. But what's interesting to me is that it's become part of an everyday conversation, and people do have questions. It feels like we should have more money in our bank account than we do right now. And then some people argue that it's too slow to respond to the current economic. Well, how could we have planned this economic uplift that we've had? So these questions are important. It's important for the voters to understand them. It's important for them to understand it's also been around for more than 2 decades. It's important for them to perhaps most importantly, understand that every year there seems to be a discussion about this and workarounds. People looking at ways to work around, which is something that's happening right now in the Capitol and in the legislature. And that question of the hospital fee is so complicated, and it gets muddled up with this question of probation. It's truly unfair to the Coloradan voters to not get a better reporting on that and to instead focus on just a probation offense.
Patty, if there is going to be a big Tabor fight this year on the ballot or even in the legislature, who do you think should be or will rise to become the face of defending it?
Oh, let's see, maybe someone, a colleague of the person sitting next to me. I mean, John Caldera can make so much noise that he can make it very easy to forget that Doug Bruce was ever the father of the Tabor Amendment or the incarnation that passed in '92. I think everyone in Colorado could agree at this point that if you just consider the term de-Brucing and don't think about Tabor, I think the entire state could de-Bruce. They'd be happy not to be talking about Doug Bruce anymore. But I don't think talking about Doug Bruce really helps the the de-Taboring of Colorado. People have separated that issue and the issue of taxes and being able to vote on more taxes. They've separated that from Doug Bruce. So that group, in order to keep it and fight to keep Tabor as it is, yeah, there's going to have to be a new spokesperson. But I don't think people are going to be looking to have Doug Bruce say anything sensible about anything.
David, wrap it up for us. Has Tabor moved beyond one of its authors?
Well, when people vote on a ballot measure to increase taxes or increase government spending, that's not against the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. That's exactly what the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights is for. It's that the people get to choose. And if they want to choose that's fine. The Taxpayers' Bill of Rights is not to crush all government spending. It's just to give the people the final say on that. Doug Bruce, with his contentious personality, has been having run-ins with the law for 20 years. My dad, who opposed just about everything Doug Bruce Doug Bruce stood for. Wrote in the 90s that there was an element of political persecution to the cases against him. Miller Hudson, like my dad, a former Democratic state representative, wrote the same thing in the Colorado Statesman not too long ago. About the current case, I don't know.